The automatic doors of Chicago Memorial Hospital slid open for the 100th time that evening, but Tasha Williams barely noticed. Her feet throbbed in her worn sneakers, her navy scrubs clung to her back with perspiration, and the 17-hour shift had blurred into a haze of beeping monitors and urgent calls. She had stepped outside for just 5 minutes, craving fresh air that didn't smell like antiseptic and illness. The October night was crisp and she closed her eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over her face. That's when she heard it. A heavy thud against concrete. A gasping sound that made her nurse instincts flare to life. Her eyes snapped open. 20 feet away, illuminated by the harsh parking lot lights, a man in an expensive charcoal suit crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. His body convulsed once, twice, then went terrifyingly still. His face had turned a sickly gray color, lips already tinged with blue. A leather briefcase skittered across the pavement, papers scattering in the wind. Tasha didn't think. She ran. Sir, can you hear me? She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already moving to check his pulse. Nothing. His chest wasn't rising. Her training took over, pushing past the exhaustion and the fear. She tilted his head back, checked his airway, and positioned her hands over his chest. She began compressions. Hard and fast, just like she'd done 1,000 times. But this wasn't a training dummy in a sterile classroom. This was a real man, maybe in his early 30s, with a wedding ring tan line on his finger and a small scar above his left eyebrow. Someone's son. Maybe someone's husband. Someone who had woken up this morning with plans and dreams and people waiting for him somewhere. Come on, she whispered through gritted teeth. Come on, stay with me. Her arms burned. Her shoulders screamed. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because if she stopped, he would die right here on this cold pavement, alone except for an exhausted nurse who should have gone home hours ago. I need help out here, she screamed toward the hospital entrance, but her voice barely carried over the sound of traffic from the nearby highway. She was alone with him. Just her and this dying stranger and the weight of his life in her hands. 30 compressions. She gave him 2 rescue breaths, watching his chest rise and fall with her efforts. Then back to compressions. Her whole body ached. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She lost count of the cycles. Time became meaningless, just the rhythm of her hands pushing life back into his body. Then finally, blessedly, he gasped. His body jerked. His eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused, and he gasped again, drawing in desperate lungfuls of air. You're okay, Tasha said, her voice shaking with relief and adrenaline. You're going to be okay. I'm a nurse. You had a cardiac event. Stay still. This time when she shouted for help, 2 security guards came running, followed by an ER team with a gurney. They swarmed around them, professional and efficient, transferring him onto the stretcher, hooking up oxygen, firing questions at her that she answered automatically. Good work, Williams, Dr. Patterson said, touching her shoulder as they wheeled the man inside. You saved his life. Tasha nodded, unable to speak. Her hands were trembling. Her scrubs had dirty smudges from the pavement. She watched them disappear through the automatic doors, the man's hand hanging limply off the side of the gurney, and she felt something shift inside her chest. How close he had come. How easily he could have died alone in that parking lot. She didn't even know his name. Have you ever wondered what you would do if someone's life was literally in your hands? Could you push past exhaustion and fear to save a complete stranger? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to hear what happens next in Tasha's incredible journey. Tasha went back inside and finished her shift. She treated a teenager with a broken arm, an elderly woman with pneumonia, and a construction worker with a deep laceration. She documented everything with mechanical precision, her hands steady even though her mind kept drifting back to that moment. The feel of his ribs beneath her palms. The terrible stillness before he gasped back to life. At 3 a.m. her shift finally ended. She changed out of her soiled scrubs, pulled on jeans and a green sweater, and walked to the bus stop in the pre-dawn darkness. The bus was nearly empty, just her and a sleeping homeless man and a tired woman in a fast food uniform. Tasha rested her head against the cool window, watching the city slide past. She lived in a tiny studio apartment in a neighborhood that real estate agents called up and coming, which really meant old buildings and check-cashing places on every corner. But it was hers. She'd worked 2 jobs through nursing school to afford it, and she kept working double shifts to pay down the crushing weight of her student loans. Inside, she kicked off her sneakers and collapsed onto her second-hand couch. Her body felt like lead. But she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing his face. The gray pallor. The blue lips. The moment his eyes opened and found hers. Who was he? Did he have family? Would someone be getting a terrible phone call right now or a relieved one? She hoped he was okay. She hoped he would wake up tomorrow and get a second chance at whatever life he'd been living. Tasha finally fell asleep as dawn light crept through her thin curtains, still wearing her jeans, too exhausted to even pull the blanket over herself. She dreamed of steady compressions and gasping breaths and a stranger's life balanced on the edge of a knife. She had no idea that saving one man's life would change everything. 3 days passed. Tasha worked another double shift, studied for her advanced cardiac life support recertification, and tried to forget the incident in the parking lot. She checked the hospital records once, just to make sure he'd survived. Brandon Hayes, age 32, CEO of Hayes Technology Solutions. He'd been stabilized and transferred to the cardiac unit. That was all she knew, all she needed to know. She'd done her job. He was alive. That was enough. Except it wasn't, not entirely. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments. While waiting for the bus. While restocking for supplies. While eating reheated rice and beans at 2 a.m. in the break room. She wondered if he knew how close he'd come. If he remembered her face. If he was grateful or scared or angry at his own body for betraying him. On Thursday afternoon, Tasha was at the nurse's station, updating patient charts, when a commotion erupted near the elevator. She glanced up, mildly curious. Hospital visitors sometimes got lost or confused. But then she saw him. Brandon Hayes walked toward her carrying the largest bouquet of red roses she'd ever seen. He looked different than he had on the pavement. His color was good, his dark eyes alert and focused. He wore casual clothes, expensive jeans and a crisp blue button-down shirt, and he moved with the confidence of someone used to commanding boardrooms. But there was something vulnerable in his expression as he approached her. Tasha Williams? His voice was deep, slightly rough, like he'd been talking a lot or maybe crying. She stood up slowly, aware that every nurse, doctor and visitor in the hallway had stopped to watch. Yes. I'm Brandon Hayes. You saved my life. He extended the roses toward her, and she could see his hands were shaking slightly. These don't even begin to express my gratitude, but I wanted to start somewhere. Tasha took the bouquet stunned. The roses were real, not grocery store flowers but the kind that came from expensive florists, each bloom perfect. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The doctors told me what happened. You performed CPR for almost 8 minutes. By yourself. After working a 17-hour shift. You didn't give up on me. I'm a nurse, she said simply. It's what we do. No. His intensity startled her. It's what you do. The security footage showed everything. You could have just called for help and waited. Instead you ran to me. You fought for me. You brought me back. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. I have a mother who would have buried her only child. I have a company with 3,000 employees depending on me. I have plans and dreams and a whole life I haven't lived yet. And I have all of that because you didn't give up. Tasha felt her own eyes stinging. I'm glad you're okay. I want to take you to dinner. The words came out in a rush. Please. Let me properly thank you. Let me get to know the woman who gave me a second chance. She hesitated. This man was clearly wealthy, powerful, from a completely different world than hers. What would they even talk about? But then she remembered what she'd promised herself after so many years of struggling alone. When someone offers you kindness, accept it. When someone wants to give, let them. Life was hard enough without refusing help out of pride. Okay, she said, and was rewarded with a smile that transformed his entire face. Really? That's wonderful. What day works for you? I'm off on Sunday. Sunday is perfect. I'll pick you up at 6. Where do you live? Tasha gave him her address, watching his face carefully for any judgment. But he just nodded, pulling out his phone to record the information. No shock at the neighborhood, no subtle flinch. Just acceptance. Thank you, Tasha. Truly. He reached out and squeezed her hand gently. His palm was warm, his grip firm. I'll see you Sunday. She watched him walk back to the elevator, aware of the whispers already starting around her. She buried her face in the roses, breathing in their sweet scent, and allowed herself a small smile. Maybe good things did happen sometimes. Maybe kindness could come from unexpected places. Maybe saving one stranger's life could open doors she'd never imagined. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of questions from curious colleagues and patients. Everyone wanted to know about the handsome CEO with the roses. Tasha deflected most of the attention, but inside she felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Hope. The sense that maybe her life was about to shift in ways she couldn't predict. When she got home that night, she put the roses in a large plastic pitcher since she didn't own a proper vase. They filled her tiny apartment with color and fragrance, a reminder that sometimes good deeds came back to you in surprising ways. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of anxiety and excitement. Tasha stood in front of her closet, staring at her limited options. She didn't own fancy dresses or designer clothes. Her wardrobe consisted of scrubs, jeans, a few simple tops, and one maroon dress she'd bought for a friend's wedding 3 years ago. She pulled out the maroon dress. It was modest, with short sleeves and a hem that fell just below her knees. The fabric was soft, comfortable. Would have to do. She paired it with her only pair of dress shoes, simple black flats, and spent extra time on her hair, twisting it into a neat bun at the base of her neck. At exactly 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Tasha took a deep breath, grabbed her small purse and opened it. Brandon stood in the hallway holding a single white lily. He wore a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but his smile was warm and genuine. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She accepted the lily, touched by the gesture. "Let me just put this in water." As she set the lily in the pitcher with the roses, she caught Brandon glancing around her apartment. She saw it through his eyes. The small space, the second-hand furniture, the medical textbooks stacked on the coffee table, the inspirational quotes she'd taped to the walls during her darkest moments of nursing school. But when she turned back to him, there was no pity in his expression. Just interest. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." He'd sent a car, a sleek black sedan with a driver who held the door open for her. Tasha slid into the leather seat, feeling out of place and excited all at once. Brandon settled beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I hope you like Italian food," he said as the car pulled into traffic. "I love it. Though I usually make it at home from budget recipes." He laughed. "I lived on ramen and canned soup through college." "I understand." The restaurant was the kind of place Tasha had only seen in movies. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, actual fresh flowers on every table. A hostess greeted Brandon by name and led them to a private corner booth. Tasha slid into the seat, hyper-aware of the crystal glasses and multiple forks she wasn't entirely sure how to use. Brandon must have sensed her discomfort because he leaned forward and said quietly, "I'm nervous too." "You are." "Absolutely. I keep thinking I'm going to say something stupid and you'll realize I'm just a regular person who happens to be good at technology and business deals. Nothing special." His vulnerability eased something in her chest. "You almost died 3 days ago. I think that makes you pretty special for still being here." "Because of you." His gaze was intense. "Tell me about yourself, Tasha. I want to know everything." So she told him. About growing up in the south side of Chicago with her younger sister Keely and their aunt who'd raised them after their parents died in a car accident. About how she'd wanted to be a nurse since she was 12 and had volunteered at a free clinic. About the crushing weight of student loans and working double shifts just to make the minimum payments. About her dream of one day opening her own community health clinic where people could get care regardless of their ability to pay. Brandon listened like every word mattered. He asked questions, real questions, not just polite filler. He wanted to know about her patients, her aunt, her sister who was now in college studying social work. And when their food arrived, he kept the conversation going effortlessly. Then it was his turn. He told her about building his company from scratch, starting in a garage with 2 friends and a vision for making technology accessible to underserved communities. He talked about losing his father when he was 25 and having to grow up fast to take care of his mother. He described the loneliness of success, how wealth had isolated him from real connections. "Everyone wants something," he said quietly. "Business partnerships, investments, access. It's exhausting trying to figure out who actually cares about you versus who cares about your bank account." "That must be hard," Tasha said softly. "It is. But then I collapsed in a hospital parking lot, and a complete stranger saved my life without knowing who I was or what I could do for her. You didn't save me because I'm a CEO. You saved me because I'm a human being who needed help." He reached across the table and took her hand. "That means everything to me." Tasha felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm glad I was there." "Me too." They talked for 3 hours, long after the plates were cleared and the dessert was finished. They laughed about nursing school disasters and business presentations gone wrong. They shared their fears and hopes. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, Tasha realized she was falling for this man. Not for his money or status, but for the kindness in his eyes and the genuine interest he showed in her life. When Brandon finally drove her home, he walked her to her door like a gentleman. "Can I see you again?" he asked. I'd like that. Good. Because I have something I want to talk to you about. Something important. Tasha's heart skipped. Okay. He kissed her cheek softly, then stepped back. Good night, Tasha. Thank you for tonight. Good night, Brandon. She watched him walk back to the car, her cheek tingling where his lips had touched. Inside her apartment, she leaned against the door and smiled until her face hurt. Whatever was happening between them, it felt right. It felt like hope. 2 days later, Brandon appeared at Tasha's apartment unannounced. She'd just gotten home from a night shift, still in her scrubs, hair messily pulled back, exhaustion written across her face. When she opened the door and saw him standing there with a folder in his hands and determination in his eyes, her heart stuttered. Brandon? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Can I come in? She stepped aside, suddenly self-conscious about the state of her apartment. Dishes in the sink, laundry in a basket on the couch, medical journals spread across the coffee table. But Brandon didn't seem to notice. He sat down on the couch, moving the laundry basket carefully aside, and patted the cushion next to him. Sit with me. Tasha sat, worry gnawing at her stomach. Is everything okay? Are you feeling all right? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. The doctors say I'm making an excellent recovery. He turned to face her fully. But that's not why I'm here. Tasha, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation at dinner. About your dreams. About the community health clinic you want to open. Brandon, let me finish. He opened the folder, revealing papers covered in numbers and legal text. I've had my attorneys draw up some documents. I want to pay off your student loans. All of them. And I want to fund your community health clinic. Building, equipment, staff salaries for the first 2 years. Everything you need to make your dream a reality. Tasha stared at him, unable to process the words. What? No. Brandon, that's too much. I can't accept that. Why not? Because it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because we barely know each other. Because I didn't save your life so you'd feel obligated to. This isn't about obligation. He set the folder down and took both her hands in his. Tasha, you gave me my life back. Not just the physical act of reviving me, but you reminded me what actually matters. Before I collapsed, I was so focused on board meetings and quarterly earnings that I'd forgotten why I started my company in the first place. To help people. To make a difference. Tears streamed down Tasha's face. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll let me do this. Not because you owe me anything, but because the world needs more people like you. People who dedicate their lives to helping others despite getting nothing but exhaustion and debt in return. You deserve support. You deserve to see your dreams come true. Tasha thought about all the years of struggle. The nights she'd cried over her loan statements, wondering if she'd ever be free of the debt. The countless times she'd sketched out plans for her clinic on napkins during breaks, knowing it would never happen without resources she didn't have. And here was someone offering her everything she needed. Not as charity but as a recognition of her worth. She remembered her promise to herself. Accept kindness when it's offered. Let people help you. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll accept. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you so much. He pulled her into a hug and she buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing with relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. He held her tight, one hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. There's one more thing, he said when she finally pulled back to wipe her eyes. I want to keep seeing you. Not as a benefactor or someone you feel obligated to, but as someone who genuinely cares about you. Someone who wants to be part of your life if you'll let me. I'd like that too, Tasha said, her voice thick with emotion. I really would. Good. He smiled, that beautiful smile that lit up his whole face. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night in the parking lot. You're extraordinary, Tasha. And I want to get to know every part of you. They spent the rest of the evening going over the paperwork. Brandon explained each document patiently, making sure she understood everything. The loan payoff would be processed immediately. The clinic funding would be set up in a trust, with Tasha having full control over how it was used. He'd also arranged for a team of contractors and healthcare consultants to help her navigate the process of opening the facility. I don't want to take over your dream, he assured her. These people work for you. You make all the decisions. I'm just providing the resources. By the time he left, night had fallen. Tasha walked him to the door, still feeling like she was floating. At the threshold, he turned back to her. Can I take you out again this weekend? Somewhere fun, nothing formal. Just you and me. I'd love that. He kissed her forehead softly. Get some rest. You look exhausted. I am, she admitted. but I'm also happier than I've been in years. Me too. After he left, Tasha sat on her couch, staring at the folder full of life-changing documents. She thought about calling her sister, her aunt, everyone she knew. But instead, she just sat there in the quiet, letting the reality sink in. Her loans would be gone. Her dream would become real. And she'd found someone who saw her not for what she could give him, but for who she was. Sometimes miracles happened. Sometimes saving one life saved your own in return. The next 2 months passed in a blur of joy and new experiences. True to his word, Brandon arranged for Tasha's student loans to be paid in full. The day she received the confirmation letter, she cried for an hour straight, overwhelmed by the freedom she'd never thought she'd have. No more crushing monthly payments. No more panic about interest rates. Just freedom. But the financial gift was only part of what was changing in her life. Brandon had become a constant presence, and she found herself falling deeper for him with each passing day. He showed up at the hospital with coffee during her breaks. He sent flowers to her apartment with handwritten notes that made her smile. He invited her to business dinners where she met fascinating people who treated her with respect, not as Brandon's charity case but as someone worth knowing in her own right. In return, Tasha introduced Brandon to her world. She brought him to the neighborhood community center where she volunteered on her days off, teaching CPR classes to teenagers. She took him to her aunt's house for Sunday dinner, where he charmed everyone by helping wash dishes and listening intently to Keely's passionate speeches about social justice. "He's a keeper," her aunt whispered while they were alone in the kitchen. "That boy looks at you like you hung the moon." "I really like him," Tasha admitted. "But sometimes I worry this is all too good to be true. Honey, you've spent your whole life giving to others. Maybe it's time you let yourself receive some good things too." Brandon took her to a charity gala where she wore a beautiful blue gown he'd surprised her with, insisting it was a gift, not an obligation. She felt like Cinderella, dancing with him in a ballroom full of Chicago's elite. But what touched her most was how he kept her close, introducing her as Tasha, the woman who saved my life and changed everything. She also took him to the free clinic where she'd first decided to become a nurse. They spent a Saturday afternoon organizing donated medical supplies and helping the overworked staff. Brandon rolled up his sleeves and worked alongside her, asking questions and genuinely interested in understanding the challenges of providing healthcare to underserved populations. "This is why your clinic matters so much," he said as they drove home that evening. "These people need consistent, quality care. You're going to change lives, Tasha." Work on the clinic was moving forward rapidly. Brandon had connected her with his best project managers, and together they'd found the perfect location, a renovated building in the heart of the community she wanted to serve. Every week, Tasha met with contractors and medical supply companies, making decisions about everything from paint colors to examination tables. Brandon attended some of these meetings but always deferred to her expertise. "This is your vision," he reminded her. "I'm just the guy writing the checks." But he was so much more than that. He was her partner in every way that mattered. He celebrated her victories and supported her through the stressful moments. When she had a particularly rough shift at the hospital, he'd show up with her favorite takeout and just listen. When she felt overwhelmed by clinic decisions, he'd help her break down problems into manageable pieces. One evening, as they sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights, Tasha curled up against his side on the couch. She felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. "What are you thinking about?" Brandon asked, his fingers gently playing with her hair. "How different my life is now compared to 3 months ago. How grateful I am. How scared I am that something will happen to take this all away." He tilted her face up to look at him. "Nothing is going to take this away. I'm not going anywhere, Tasha. You're stuck with me. Promise?" "I promise." He kissed her softly and she melted into him, feeling safe and cherished. They spent more and more time together. Brandon adjusted his work schedule to match her shifts as much as possible. When she worked nights, he'd often stay up late just to video chat with her during her breaks. When he had important business trips, he'd invite her along when she had days off, turning work obligations into mini vacations where they explored new cities together. Her sister Keely adored him, especially after he offered to pay for her remaining college tuition. When Tasha protested that he'd already done too much, Brandon simply said, "Family takes care of family. And you and Keely are family to me now." His mother Patricia became a regular presence in their lives too. She was a gracious woman with Brandon's same kind eyes, and she welcomed Tasha with open arms. Over brunch one Sunday, Patricia took Tasha's hand and said, "I've never seen my son this happy. Thank you for loving him." "It's easy to love him," Tasha replied honestly. But it wasn't just the grand gestures that made her fall deeper. It was the small moments. The way Brandon always made sure she ate during her long shifts. How he remembered her favorite songs and would play them in the car. The way he talked about their future together, not as a fantasy but as a certainty he was working toward. Do you believe in fate? That some meetings are meant to happen? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to follow Tasha and Brandon's incredible love story. One night, 6 weeks into their relationship, as they walked through a quiet park after dinner, Brandon stopped and pulled her close. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I know it's fast but I can't keep it in anymore. You're everything I never knew I needed." Tasha felt tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. "I'm falling in love with you too." They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, two people from different worlds who'd found something precious together. Something built on mutual respect, genuine care, and the profound connection that came from one person giving another a second chance at life. As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and blooming flowers, Brandon proposed an idea that both excited and terrified Tasha. A formal family gathering where both sides could meet properly, not just quick introductions but a real celebration of their relationship. "My mother wants to host a dinner party," he explained over breakfast one Saturday morning. "She wants to properly welcome you into the family. And I'd love for your aunt and Keely to come too." "Your mother's house?" Tasha knew Patricia lived in a mansion in one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs. "Yes, but don't be nervous. She's wonderful, you know that. And she specifically asked me to tell you to dress comfortably. This isn't about impressing anyone. It's about bringing together the people we love." The dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. Tasha spent the week alternating between excitement and anxiety. She wanted Brandon's mother to like her, to see her as worthy of her son. And she wanted her own family to feel comfortable in such an unfamiliar setting. When Sunday arrived, Brandon picked up Tasha, Keely, and their Aunt Lorraine in his car. Keely wore a bright red dress that complemented her dark skin beautifully, chattering excitedly about meeting Brandon's business associates. Aunt Lorraine, elegant in a simple green dress, kept squeezing Tasha's hand reassuringly. Patricia's home was as impressive as Tasha remembered, a beautiful colonial with manicured gardens and a circular driveway. But Patricia herself greeted them at the door in slacks and a comfortable sweater, arms open wide. "Welcome, welcome. I'm so happy you're all here." She hugged each of them warmly. "Please come in. Make yourselves at home." The interior was elegant but not ostentatious. Family photos lined the hallways, including several of a young Brandon at various ages. Patricia led them into a spacious living room where several other people waited. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet the people most important to Brandon right now." Patricia gestured to Tasha. "This is Tasha Williams, the remarkable woman who saved my son's life. And this is her sister Keely and her Aunt Lorraine." The introductions flowed smoothly. There was Patricia's sister Margaret and her husband Thomas. Brandon's best friend Joel and his wife Christina, who Tasha had met briefly at a previous dinner. And Patricia's close friend Elizabeth, who turned out to be a retired nurse and immediately engaged Tasha in conversation about healthcare. Dinner was served in a dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. The table was set beautifully but the atmosphere was warm and casual. Patricia had clearly gone out of her way to make everyone comfortable. As they ate, conversations flowed naturally. Keely talked about her social work studies, and Margaret shared stories about her own career and education. Thomas and Brandon discussed baseball, discovering they were both lifelong Cubs fans. Aunt Lorraine and Elizabeth bonded over their shared love of gardening. But the moment that touched Tasha most came midway through dinner. Patricia stood, wineglass in hand, and addressed the table. "I'd like to make a toast. 3 months ago I almost lost my son. I got a phone call that every mother fears, telling me Brandon had collapsed and was being rushed to the hospital. I drove there not knowing if I'd make it in time to say goodbye." Her voice wavered, and Brandon reached over to squeeze her hand. "But because of one extraordinary woman, my son is still here. Tasha, you didn't just save Brandon's life that night. You saved mine too. You gave me more time with my only child. And in the process, you've brought more joy into his life than I've seen in years." Patricia's eyes glistened with tears. "So I want to say thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And I want to welcome you into our family not because of what you did but because of who you are. You're kind, dedicated, and you make my son happier than I've ever seen him. We're blessed to know you." Everyone raised their glasses. Tasha wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by the acceptance and love in the room. Brandon wrapped his arm around her shoulders, kissing her temple gently. After dinner, Patricia gave them a tour of the gardens. She and Aunt Lorraine walked together, deep in conversation, while Keely explored the flowers with Margaret. Brandon kept Tasha's hand firmly in his as they strolled through the rose garden. "This is going well," he murmured. "Everyone is so kind. Your mother is wonderful. She loves you. She told me yesterday that she thinks you're perfect for me." Tasha laughed softly. "I'm far from perfect. Perfect for me then." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Tasha, I know we've only been together for a few months, but I need you to know something. You're it for me. You're the person I want to build a life with. I want more nights like this with our families together. I want to support your dreams and share mine with you. I want everything with you." Her heart felt too big for her chest. "I want that too." "Good. Because I'm in this for the long term. I hope you are too." "I am." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, there in his mother's rose garden with the scent of flowers surrounding them and their family's laughter drifting from the house. Later that evening, as Brandon drove them home, Aunt Lorraine leaned forward from the back seat. "Young man, I approve. You treat my niece right." "I intend to, ma'am. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me." "Good answer." Aunt Lorraine sat back, satisfied. Keely chimed in, "When's the wedding?" "Because I'm already planning my maid of honor speech." Everyone laughed, but Tasha caught the look Brandon gave her. A look that said Keely might not be wrong about where this was heading. And for the first time in her life, Tasha allowed herself to believe in a future filled with love, family, and endless possibilities. 4 months after their first date, Tasha stood outside her community health clinic and felt like she might burst with pride. The building gleamed in the morning sunlight, its red brick facade freshly cleaned, the sign above the door reading Southside Community Health Center, in bold, welcoming letters. Inside, everything was ready. Examination rooms equipped with state-of-the-art medical equipment. A waiting area with comfortable chairs and toys for children. A small pharmacy offering medications at cost. Offices for her staff, including 3 other nurses, 2 doctors, and an administrative coordinator. Everything she dreamed about, now real and solid. The grand opening was scheduled for 10 a.m. It was 8:30, and Tasha walked through the building one more time, checking every detail. Her staff would arrive soon, along with community members, local politicians, and several of Brandon's business associates who'd expressed interest in supporting the clinic's mission. Brandon found her in one of the exam rooms, staring at the medical supplies with misty eyes. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. "Overwhelmed. Grateful. Scared. Happy. Everything all at once. You should be proud. This is incredible, Tasha. Everything you've worked for." She turned in his arms to face him. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. It might have taken longer, but your passion and dedication would have made this happen eventually. I just got to speed up the timeline." He kissed her forehead. "You ready?" "Ready." By 9:30, the building was filling up. Tasha's staff arrived, professional in their matching blue scrubs, excited to begin this new venture. Aunt Lorraine and Keely came early, along with several neighbors who'd watched Tasha grow up. Patricia arrived with flowers and warm hugs for everyone. At 10 a.m., Tasha stepped outside to address the crowd that had gathered. Over 200 people stood in the parking lot, community members mixed with business leaders, all there to celebrate this new resource. Tasha took the microphone with trembling hands. "Good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Tasha Williams, and this clinic represents a dream I've had since I was 12 years old. I grew up in this neighborhood. I've seen too many people suffer because they couldn't afford basic health care. I've watched friends and neighbors struggle with preventable conditions because they had no access to consistent medical care." She paused, composing herself. "This clinic is going to change that. We will provide quality health care to anyone who walks through our doors, regardless of their ability to pay. We will treat everyone with dignity and respect. We will be a place of healing and hope." The crowd applauded. Tasha glanced at Brandon, who stood off to the side with such pride in his eyes that she almost lost her composure. "I also want to thank someone special. Brandon Hayes, who believed in this dream and gave me the resources to make it real. But more than that, he's shown me what true partnership looks like. What it means to support someone else's vision without trying to control it. So thank you, Brandon, for everything." More applause. Brandon smiled but shook his head slightly, deflecting attention back to her. After the speeches, Tasha cut the ribbon across the front door, and people flooded inside for tours. The reception was overwhelming. Parents with sick children who'd been putting off medical care because of costs. Elderly neighbors needing medication refills. Young adults requiring routine checkups they'd never been able to afford. Everyone excited about having a healthcare option that wouldn't bankrupt them. Tasha spent hours talking with community members, her staff answering questions and scheduling appointments. The clinic would officially begin seeing patients the next day, but they registered over 50 people that afternoon alone. In a quiet moment, Tasha found Brandon in her office. He was looking at the medical degree she'd hung on the wall, the one that had cost her so much in both money and sacrifice. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it." "No, sweetheart. This is yours. Your dream, your hard work, your heart poured into every detail. I'm just honored to have played a small part." She walked into his arms, resting her head against his chest. "It doesn't feel real yet. It will. Tomorrow when you see your first patient. Next week when word spreads and more people come. A year from now when you look back and realize how many lives you've changed." He tilted her face up to his. "You're going to do so much good here, Tasha. More than you can imagine." That evening, they had a small celebration at a local restaurant with both families and her clinic staff. Everyone toasted to new beginnings and bright futures. Keely gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry. Patricia presented Tasha with a stethoscope that had belonged to her late father, a doctor who dedicated his life to serving others. "He would have loved you," Patricia said, pressing the stethoscope into Tasha's hands. "And he would have been so proud of what you're doing." As the celebration wound down and they prepared to leave, Brandon pulled Tasha aside. "Walk with me." They strolled through the neighborhood, hand in hand, as evening settled over the city. The street lights flickered on. Children played on front stoops. The sounds of dinner being prepared drifted from open windows. "This is your community," Brandon said. "These are your people. And now you get to serve them in the way you've always wanted. I still can't believe it's real." "Believe it? You made it happen." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "And I hope you know that watching you achieve this dream has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. You inspire me every single day." Tasha felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. "I love you, Brandon Hayes. I love you too, Tasha Williams. More than I ever thought possible." They stood there on the street corner where she'd grown up, holding each other as the world continued around them. She'd saved his life that night in the parking lot, but the truth was he'd saved hers too. He'd given her not just resources but belief, support, and a love that made everything brighter. Tomorrow her real work would begin. But tonight, she just held on to the man who'd changed everything and let herself be happy. 2 weeks after the clinic opening, Brandon received news that required his immediate attention. A major acquisition deal in Singapore needed his presence for negotiations. What was supposed to be a week-long trip extended to a month when complications arose. "I don't want to go," he told Tasha the night before his flight. They were in his apartment, her head resting on his lap as he absently played with her hair. "Not now when you're just getting the clinic established. You have to go. Your company needs you. We'll be fine. I'm going to miss you so much." "I'll miss you too. But we'll video chat every day. It's only a month." Only a month. But it felt like forever. The first week was the hardest. Tasha threw herself into work at the clinic, which was busier than she'd anticipated. Word had spread quickly about the new healthcare resource, and they were seeing over 40 patients a day. It was exhausting but fulfilling work. Every person she helped, every child she treated, every elderly patient she listened to made the long hours worthwhile. But at night, alone in her apartment, she missed Brandon with an ache that surprised her. They'd been inseparable for months, and his absence left a hollow space in her daily life. She missed his laugh, his touch, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. They video chatted every evening, adjusting for the time difference. Brandon would be starting his day while Tasha was ending hers. She'd tell him about the patients she'd seen, the challenges her staff was navigating, the small victories that made her smile. He'd share about his meetings, the cultural differences he was experiencing, the beautiful views from his hotel room that he wished she could see in person. "I hate sleeping without you," he admitted one night, his face pixelated on her phone screen. "Me too. This apartment feels too empty now. When I get back, maybe we should talk about changing that." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe you shouldn't have to sleep alone anymore. Maybe we should make this permanent." "Brandon, just think about it. No pressure. But I'm tired of being apart from you, even when I'm in the same city." After 2 weeks, Tasha noticed changes in Brandon. He looked tired, stressed. The negotiations weren't going as smoothly as hoped. He was dealing with cultural barriers and stubborn business partners who kept changing terms. "I might need to stay longer," he told her during one call, and she could hear the frustration in his voice. How much longer? Maybe another 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Tasha. I know this isn't what we planned. It's okay. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back. But she worried about him. She could see the strain on his face, the exhaustion in his eyes. He was pushing himself too hard, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping. It reminded her too much of the man who'd collapsed in the parking lot. You need to take care of yourself, she urged him. Remember what happened last time you overworked. I know. I'm being careful. Taking my medications, seeing the company doctor regularly. I promise I'm okay. Meanwhile, Tasha's own life continued to evolve. The clinic was thriving. She'd hired 2 additional nurses and was in talks with a dentist about adding dental services. Local businesses were donating supplies and funding. The community had embraced the clinic wholeheartedly. Her sister Keely had started interning at a social services agency and would stop by the clinic regularly, connecting patients with resources they needed beyond medical care. Her aunt visited often, bringing home-cooked meals for the staff and encouragement for Tasha. You've built something special here, Aunt Lorraine said one afternoon as they watched patients in the waiting room. Your parents would be so proud. I wish they could see it. They can, baby. They're watching. And they're smiling. But despite the clinic's success and the love of her family, Tasha felt Brandon's absence like a physical weight. She caught herself looking at her phone constantly, hoping for messages. She wore one of his shirts to bed because it still smelled like him. She counted down the days until his scheduled return. Then, 3 weeks into his trip, during their nightly video call, Tasha saw something shift in Brandon's expression. What's wrong? She asked immediately. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was stressed. The deal is falling apart. My partners want me to stay another month to try to salvage it. But Tasha. His voice cracked. I can't do it. I can't stay away from you another month. I miss you too much. Nothing here matters if I don't have you. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm coming home. I'll send my VP to finish negotiations. I need to be with you. The business will survive. But I won't survive another month without you. Tears streamed down Tasha's face. Are you sure? This is a big deal for your company. You're a bigger deal to me. You're everything, Tasha. I've realized something these past few weeks. All the money and success in the world doesn't mean anything if I'm not sharing it with you. I want to wake up next to you. I want to see you at the end of each day. I want to be there for the good moments and the hard ones. I want us to build a life together, not just talk about it from opposite sides of the world. When will you be home? I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be there in 2 days. 2 days. 2 days. And Tasha? When I get back, we need to have a serious conversation about our future. Because I know what I want. I just hope you want the same thing. After they hung up, Tasha sat in the darkness of her apartment, her heart racing. She knew what he was going to say. She knew what he wanted. And the truth was she wanted it too. She wanted forever with Brandon Hayes. She wanted to wake up beside him and build a life together. She wanted everything. The next 2 days passed in a blur of anticipation. She told her family Brandon was coming home early, and they all understood what it meant. Keely started planning a celebration. Aunt Lorraine just smiled knowingly. On the morning of Brandon's return, Tasha could barely focus at the clinic. She kept checking her phone for updates on his flight. Finally, at 3 p.m. she received a text. Landed. On my way to the place where it all started. Meet me there. The place where it all started. The hospital parking lot. Where she'd saved his life and changed both of their futures. Tasha closed the clinic early, leaving her capable staff in charge, and drove to the hospital. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Her heart pounded in her chest. She parked in the same spot where she'd found him collapsed months ago and looked around. Then she saw him. Walking toward her with a suitcase in one hand and determination in his eyes. He looked tired from travel but more alive than he'd seemed in weeks. When their eyes met, they both started running. They crashed together in the middle of the parking lot, holding each other so tightly it almost hurt. Tasha breathed him in, feeling complete for the first time in a month. I'm home, he whispered into her hair. I'm home and I'm never leaving you again. I love you, she said through tears. I love you too. So much. He pulled back just enough to look at her. And I have something very important to ask you. But not here. Come with me. He took her hand and led her toward the hospital entrance, past the spot where she'd given him CPR, through the doors and to the elevator. They rode up in silence, just holding hands, his thumb stroking her knuckles. When the doors opened, he led her to the rooftop. The place where staff sometimes went for fresh air. where the city sprawled out beneath them in all its complicated beauty. And that's when Tasha knew. This was it. The moment that would change everything again. Brandon led Tasha to the edge of the hospital rooftop, where a low wall overlooked the city. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the concrete, and a gentle breeze carried the sounds of traffic from below. It was the same view she'd seen countless times during breaks over her years at the hospital, but today it looked different. Today it looked like the edge of something new. "Why did you bring me up here?" she asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "Because this is where our story started. Right here, 7 floors above where you saved my life." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Tasha, these past few weeks away from you have been the longest of my life. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough to focus on work and push through. But I was wrong. Brandon, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "Every morning I woke up in that hotel room, I reached for you and you weren't there. Every achievement, every breakthrough in the negotiations, felt empty because I couldn't share it with you. And I realized something important. I realized that you're not just someone I love. You're my home. You're the person I want to come back to every single day for the rest of my life." Tasha's eyes filled with tears. She could feel what was coming, the question hovering in the air between them. But before Brandon could continue, the rooftop door burst open. A frantic nurse in green scrubs ran out, looking around desperately. "Is anyone up here? We need help. There's a child in respiratory distress in the parking lot. We need a nurse right now." Tasha's training kicked in instantly. She turned to the nurse. "I'm a nurse. Lead the way." She and Brandon ran after the nurse, racing down the stairs because the elevator was too slow. They burst out of the hospital entrance into the parking lot where a crowd had gathered around a car. A woman was screaming, holding a small boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. His lips were blue, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. "He has asthma," the mother sobbed. "His inhaler isn't working. Please help him." Tasha pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the child. His name tag read Tommy. She could see immediately that he was in severe distress, his breathing shallow and rapid. This was more than a simple asthma attack. This was life-threatening. "Call 911, she ordered, her voice calm and authoritative. "We need an ambulance now." Brandon already had his phone out, making the call while Tasha focused on the child. She tilted his head back to open his airway, listening to his breathing. The wheeze was high-pitched and strained. Anaphylaxis, possibly, or a severe asthma exacerbation. "Tommy, look at me," she said softly but firmly. "I'm going to help you breathe better, okay?" The hospital staff had appeared with an emergency kit. Tasha grabbed the pediatric oxygen mask and placed it over Tommy's face, then prepared an epinephrine injection in case it was an allergic reaction. She worked quickly but carefully, every movement precise and practiced. Brandon watched in awe as Tasha transformed. This wasn't the woman he'd been about to propose to moments ago. This was a skilled medical professional, calm under pressure, making split-second decisions that could mean life or death. He'd seen her work before but never like this. Never with such high stakes and such focused intensity. "Heart rate is stabilizing," one of the nurses reported, monitoring Tommy's vitals. Tasha administered another dose of medication, adjusting the oxygen flow. "Come on, Tommy. Breathe with me. In and out. That's it." Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the child's color began to improve. His breathing became less labored. His panic started to ease as more oxygen reached his lungs. The mother was crying, holding Tommy's hand, thanking Tasha over and over. When the ambulance arrived 5 minutes later, Tommy was breathing much better though still needing oxygen support. The paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher, praising Tasha's quick action. As they prepared to leave, Tommy's mother grabbed Tasha's hand. "You saved my baby's life. How can I ever thank you?" "Just take care of him," Tasha said, squeezing her hand. "And make sure he sees his doctor about adjusting his asthma management plan." "I will. I promise. Thank you." "Thank you so much." As the ambulance pulled away, the crowd dispersed. Tasha stood there, her hands shaking now that the crisis was over. She'd done this kind of thing hundreds of times, but the adrenaline always hit afterward. Brandon wrapped his arms around her from behind, holding her steady. "You were amazing," he whispered into her ear. "Just doing my job." "No, that wasn't just a job. That was you being extraordinary. That was you saving another life because that's who you are at your core. Someone who runs toward emergencies instead of away from them. Someone who gives everything they have to help others, no matter how tired or stressed or busy they are." Tasha turned in his arms, suddenly exhausted. "I'm sorry. You were about to say something important before? Before you saved another life. He smiled, brushing tears from her cheeks. Tasha, I was going to propose to you up on that rooftop. I had this whole speech planned about how you're my home and my future. But then I watched you save that little boy and I realized something. You don't need me to complete you. You're already complete. You're already doing exactly what you were meant to do. You're already changing the world one person at a time. Brandon, I do need you, she protested. Not to complete me but to share my life with, to build something beautiful together. I know. And I need you too. But I want to ask you something differently now. Not on a rooftop with a prepared speech. But right here in this parking lot where our story began. Where you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. A second chance at life. He released her and stepped back, and Tasha's heart nearly stopped when he dropped to one knee right there on the pavement. Tasha Williams, he said, his voice strong and clear, you saved my life. You taught me what really matters. You showed me what love looks like when it's genuine and selfless and brave. I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and celebrating your victories and holding you through the hard times. Will you marry me? He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a beautiful ring, a simple design with a single diamond that caught the afternoon light. Not ostentatious, not showy. Just perfect. Tasha looked down at this man who'd changed her life as much as she'd changed his. This man who saw her not as someone to be saved or fixed but as an equal partner. This man who'd given her the resources to achieve her dreams and then stepped back to let her soar. This man she loved with everything she had. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. Brandon stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made just for her. Then he kissed her, there in the hospital parking lot with the late afternoon sun warming their faces and the sounds of the city surrounding them. When they finally broke apart, both of them crying and laughing, Tasha looked at the ring on her finger and then at the man who'd just become her fiancé. This is really happening, she whispered. This is really happening, he confirmed. We're getting married. We're getting married. They stood there holding each other, two people who'd found love in the most unexpected way. A woman who'd saved a stranger's life and a man who'd been given a second chance. Together they were building something beautiful. Something built on kindness, hope, and love. Always love. The evening after Brandon's proposal, they drove to Aunt Lorraine's house to share the news. Tasha could barely contain her excitement, constantly glancing at the ring on her finger, still not quite believing it was real. Brandon kept reaching over to hold her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles, both of them grinning like teenagers. Your aunt is going to cry, Brandon predicted as they pulled up to the familiar house. Oh, she's definitely going to cry. And Keely is going to scream. Prepare yourself. They walked up to the front door, and Tasha didn't even have to knock before Keely flung it open. You're engaged. I can see it on your face. Let me see the ring. How did you know? Tasha laughed, extending her hand. Because you both look like you're about to explode with happiness. Also, Brandon texted me that he was proposing today. You did. Tasha looked at Brandon in surprise. He shrugged, a little sheepish. I wanted to make sure I had your family's blessing. I called your aunt and Keely from Singapore and asked permission. They both said yes, thank goodness, or this would be awkward. Aunt Lorraine appeared behind Keely, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw their faces, her expression softened into pure joy. Oh baby. He finally asked you. He did. Tasha ran to her aunt, hugging her tightly. We're getting married. I'm so happy for you. For both of you. Aunt Lorraine pulled back to cup Tasha's face in her hands. Your mama and daddy would be so proud of the woman you've become. And they would have loved Brandon. They spent the evening celebrating, eating the pot roast Aunt Lorraine had somehow known to prepare, looking through old photo albums and making plans for the wedding. Keely insisted on being the maid of honor, a title Tasha gladly gave her. They talked about venues and dates and who to invite, though they both agreed they wanted something relatively small and intimate. What about a wedding at the clinic? Keely suggested. You could decorate the courtyard. It would be perfect, getting married at the place that represents everything you've built together. Tasha and Brandon exchanged glances. Actually, Tasha said slowly, that's not a bad idea. Really? Brandon looked surprised but pleased. Think about it. The clinic exists because of us. Because I saved you and you believed in my dream. It's symbolic of everything we represent. Kindness, hope, second chances, using our resources to help others. What better place to start our marriage? Then that's where we'll do it, Brandon agreed immediately. A wedding at the Southside Community Health Center. I love it. Over the next few weeks, their engagement became a whirlwind of planning and celebration. They announced it publicly and the response was overwhelming. Brandon's business colleagues sent congratulations and expensive gifts. The community surrounding the clinic threw a surprise engagement party, with decorations and cake and dozens of people who'd been helped by Tasha's work. Patricia was overjoyed, immediately bonding with Aunt Lorraine over wedding planning. The two older women spent hours together, discussing flowers and menus and music, becoming close friends in the process. Tasha continued working at the clinic, which was busier than ever. They'd expanded services to include mental health counseling and nutrition classes. A local dentist had agreed to volunteer 2 days a week. The waiting room was always full, a testament to the community's need and the clinic's success. Brandon had restructured some of his business responsibilities, delegating more to his executive team so he could spend more time with Tasha. He'd realized during his time in Singapore that work would always be there, but moments with the people he loved were fleeting and precious. One evening, 2 months after the engagement, they sat in Brandon's apartment planning the ceremony. The wedding was scheduled for the following spring, giving them time to prepare while the weather would be perfect for an outdoor celebration. "I've been thinking about something," Brandon said, setting down the list of potential guests. "After we're married, I want us to start a foundation together. The Hayes Williams Foundation, dedicated to healthcare access and education for underserved communities. We could expand the clinic model to other cities. Help other passionate healthcare workers achieve their dreams the way I helped you achieve yours." Tasha stared at him, overwhelmed. "You want to do that? But it would be a massive undertaking." "I know. But I want to build something with you. Not just a marriage but a legacy. We could change so many lives, Tasha. Together we could make a real difference." "Together," she repeated, loving the sound of that word. "I like that. Everything we do together. Partners in everything." "Partners in everything," she agreed. As winter gave way to early spring, the wedding preparations intensified. They chose a simple ceremony with close friends and family. Tasha found a beautiful dress in a local boutique, nothing overly elaborate, just elegant white silk that made her feel beautiful. Brandon wore a tailored charcoal suit that matched the one he'd been wearing the night they met. The clinic courtyard was transformed with white chairs, an arch covered in flowers and lights strung overhead. It was intimate and perfect, exactly what they'd wanted. On the morning of the wedding, Tasha stood in the clinic's office getting ready with Keely and Aunt Lorraine. Her hands trembled as she put on her dress, not from nerves but from excitement. "You ready for this?" Keely asked, fastening the buttons on Tasha's dress. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Outside, guests were arriving. Brandon's mother and her family. Friends from the hospital and the clinic. Community members who'd become like family. Brandon's business associates who'd been moved by Tasha's work. Everyone who'd been part of their journey gathered to witness the next chapter. When the music started, Tasha walked down the makeshift aisle on Aunt Lorraine's arm. And there, standing under the flower-covered arch, was Brandon. His eyes were already wet with tears as he watched her approach. Behind him stood Joel, his best man, grinning widely. Tasha took her place beside Brandon, and the officiant, a pastor from the local community church, began the ceremony. "We are gathered here to celebrate the marriage of Tasha Williams and Brandon Hayes. Theirs is a love story that began with an act of courage and compassion, and has grown into something beautiful and enduring. A reminder that sometimes the most important moments of our lives happen when we're simply being who we were meant to be." They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Brandon went first, his voice thick with emotion. "Tasha, you saved my life in that parking lot. But more than that, you taught me how to live. You showed me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or business deals, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. You're the bravest, most compassionate person I've ever known, and I promise to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams, celebrating your victories and loving you with everything I have. You're my home, my partner, and my greatest blessing." Tasha wiped tears from her cheeks before speaking her own vows. "Brandon, I ran to you that night because it's who I am. I help people. But I never expected that saving your life would save mine too. You believed in me when I was drowning in debt and exhaustion. You gave me the resources to achieve dreams I thought were impossible. But more than that, you gave me love. Real, genuine love that makes me better. You're kind, generous, and you really see me not for what I can give you but for who I am. I promise to build a life with you filled with purpose and joy and endless love." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands they'd chosen together. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Brandon pulled Tasha close and kissed her as everyone cheered. The reception was held in the clinic's waiting room, which had been cleared and decorated with flowers and lights. There was music and dancing and food from local restaurants that had donated the meal. Speeches were given, stories were shared, and laughter filled every corner. Aunt Lorraine cried through her toast. Patricia welcomed Tasha officially into the Hayes family. Keely gave a hilarious speech about Tasha's determination and stubbornness, and how she knew the moment Tasha told her about saving Brandon that this was going to be a love story. As the evening wound down, Tasha and Brandon slipped away to the clinic's rooftop, the same place where Brandon had almost proposed before Tommy's emergency. They stood at the edge, looking out over the city that had brought them together. "Mrs. Hayes," Brandon said, wrapping his arms around his wife. "How does it feel?" "Perfect. Everything feels perfect. We're going to do amazing things together. The foundation, expanding the clinics, helping so many people." "We are," she agreed. "But right now I just want to be here with you. My husband. I love you, Tasha Hayes." "I love you too, Brandon Hayes." They stood there as the sun set over Chicago, two people who'd found love in the most unexpected way. A nurse who'd refused to give up on a dying stranger. A CEO who'd been given a second chance at life. Together they were proof that kindness mattered, that hope was real, that love could transform everything. Their story had started with Tasha's hands on Brandon's chest, pushing life back into his body. But it had become so much more. It had become a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the deep certainty that they were better together than apart. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, they went back downstairs to rejoin their celebration. To dance with their families, to accept congratulations, to begin their life as husband and wife. And in the waiting room of the clinic Tasha had built, surrounded by people they loved, they took their first dance as a married couple. The song was an old soul ballad, slow and sweet, and they held each other close, moving in perfect rhythm. This was their happy ending. But it was also their beginning. The start of a life dedicated to helping others, to building something meaningful, to loving each other through every challenge and triumph that lay ahead. Tasha had saved Brandon's life in a parking lot 7 months ago. But the truth was they'd saved each other. They'd found in each other the missing pieces that made them whole. And now they had forever to build